basically a US citizen with no medical training set up a medical clinic in Uganda and is now being accused of killing 119 African children. From 2010 through 2015, Renee Bach says she took in 940 severely malnourished children and 105 of them died. Just a little backstory here. She was 19 years old when she decided to set up her own charity in Uganda. She says she had lay medical training, a CPR certificate, and her high school diploma via homeschooling. In 2011, she hired 3 Ugandan nurses to help out during the day and stocked a room she dubbed the clinic with medical gear, such as oxygen tanks, IV catheters, and monitoring equipment. But according to one of those nurses, it seemed Bach was handling a lot of the medical care herself. Here is a little bit of what Bach herself wrote in one of her blogs about a 9-month-old baby, a sick 9-month-old baby that was rushed to her clinic. She says, I hooked the baby up to oxygen and got to work, took her temperature, started an IV, checked her blood sugar, tested for malaria, and looked at her HB count. Of course, that's the measure of hemoglobin in the blood. I was attempting to diagnose the many problems that could potentially be at hand. Got it? Malaria, positive, HB 3.2, a big problem, most likely fatal. She needed a blood transfusion and fast. She also later wrote that we performed a blood transfusion, but didn't clarify who we was. And Bach again herself says she serviced more than 900 people, and we're talking about incredibly sick people. It was what shocked most of us. This is what Prima Kwagala, a Ugandan civil rights attorney, said. She said, we couldn't imagine a human being without skill taking into her care people that were almost on their deathbeds. Now, Kwagala is actually now suing Bach on behalf of two mothers who lost their children at this clinic. Her court filings include excerpts from Bach's blog, as well as a blog posted by a supporter of the charity who visited and took pictures, including one of Bach inserting an IV catheter into the vein of a severely malnourished child. She thinks Bach, who by the way is now back home in Virginia, she thinks Bach should be in jail. She says the suit is deeply necessary. These families deserve justice, and there's a larger principle at stake. Imagine if a 20-something Ugandan woman had gone to the US and set up an equivalent arrangement to treat impoverished American children. And before you respond to that, I want to show you, because Fox News actually covered this story, I want to show you the angle they decided to go with.
The mothers allege they were led to believe that Miss Renee Bach was a medical doctor and that her home was a medical facility, as she was often seen wearing a white coat, a stethoscope, and often administered medications to children in her care. The actions of Renee and SHC led to the death of hundreds of children. Renee, that is a serious allegation. How do you respond?
So first off, I have never represented myself as a medical professional or health worker of any type. The organization Serving His Children hires medical professionals that are Ugandan, local and national folks. And I have assisted our medical team in emergency settings and in crisis situations, but I have never practiced medicine, and I have never adorned or put on any sort of a uniform or white coat for that matter.
Just a little more in how Fox News, how they were referring to the people who had a problem with this. Watch this.
The problem with these reputational terrorists on the internet is even finding these people all around the world and putting out information that's not fact-based. And it's very sad when a missionary or humanitarian or any individual from the United States or any developed nation wants to go into a third world or a health crisis somewhere like in Uganda, what Renee and Serving His Children has done. And they come under these attacks with no way to really defend yourself effectively. We believe that it's important that you get good information out. And while they want to talk about these desperately sick children that were tragically lost, they're ignoring the fact that 3,600 children had their lives saved. What Serving His Children did with a medical team there in Uganda and under Renee's leadership was truly remarkable.
Okay. Guys, I want to give a little bit of context here before handing off to Francis, who was recently in Uganda. So first of all, look, we said killed in terms of the 105 kids, but yes, there's a certain death rate that comes with anyone taking care of kids, especially sick kids or people in general. So the important question is, well, what was the death rate? Was it within norms or was it outside of norms? And in this case, it was way outside of norms. In 2011, the death rate was 20% of the kids that they took care of died. That's
and they shouldn't have been taking care of them. That's the problem.
Yes. In 2012, it was 18%. Experts said if you had any kind of charity with those monstrous rates, it would go all the way up to the head of the organization, the head of like people looking after charities to make sure they're not scams, etc. Going, what is this 20% death rate doing here? This is crazy. And what's interesting is at some point in 2013, she finally hires 2 doctors. Before it was just a couple of nurses that were sometimes there and sometimes not there, okay? And the death rate drops to 10%. Well, it turns out having doctors makes a big difference. Of course it does, right? But unfortunately, not nearly enough precautions were taken. And look, as I started reading the story, I get that she went to go do good in the world and she wanted to help people, so I acknowledge that. But this savior complex leads to taking dangerous risks, and the view of the country that you're in leads to a problem like, well, I got homeschooled and I'm a high schooler, right? But I'll know, whatever little education that I have, I'll know better than their doctors. No. Yeah. If you bring those kids to the hospital, they have doctors in Uganda and they have hospitals in Uganda. They're not incredibly rich in that particular area of Uganda. We all know that, but they have doctors and hospitals and they know how to take care of kids. That doesn't mean that no kid's gonna die because some of them were in bad situations, right?
Yeah.
But a lot more kids are gonna be saved if you do the right things instead of just blundering in there. Oh, I got this. I'm gonna save Uganda. Right?
That's what happens so often. It's just because of how Africa is viewed. That one would believe that I just graduated high school and I must have, I must be better at saving kids than a doctor, than this black doctor in this African country. Because they're all poor and they all need help and they all need saving. So I must know better because I'm from America, I must know better. And it is costing people's lives. But we see this a lot with a lot of charities.
They didn't bring up her journals in the Fox News segment there, which they should have, because it gives off that immediate white savior complex where she's talking about this out-of-body experience she had and this is something I had to do. So it just kind of gives off this vibe that she was definitely continuing to overstep her reach. But as Cenk mentioned, when I went to Uganda to do the project with YouTube, we were in an area where Ugandan natives were actually opening their borders to South Sudanese refugees who were fleeing conflict and working together to provide care for both Ugandan natives who are struggling and malnutrition, and also South Sudanese refugees. So, their kindness, their overwhelming gestures to try and help each other was something that moved me beyond belief. But what I also realized is I was so naive. Right, I was also naive coming across from, I would say, an educated background and understanding that these countries and these cultures are different. That doesn't mean I'm going to go in with this idea that I'm going to save and I'm going to suddenly go around and cure these issues that are going on. And as soon as I got there, we were involved in an immediate training camp with the IRC, the International Rescue Committee, and it's echoed here in this article where they're talking about these children, especially, are basically malnourished, and anything you do has a knock-on effect. So even if you're going in and you have this, because what happens is kids come up to you when you're there and they want anything that you can potentially offer them in these poor areas. And it's such a tragic circumstance where people are often in a weird situation where even if you hand over something like a packet of crackers or food, it can have a knock-on effect because you don't understand that these kids, the metabolism isn't working, their immune system isn't working. So you're trained as you come into these areas to be aware that you can't just suddenly take it upon your own idea to go and offer children food or try to cure children or try to, I don't know, have some sort of savior complex where you can help in these areas where they have doctors and they have professionals who are looking at every single case. Because in these children, in these areas, the simplest thing, the simplest infection, the simplest misjudgment can kill them within 48 hours. It can literally kill, this is not a game where you can try to have this trial and error basis to figure out whether God sent you to try and save these children, because your mistake will cost them their lives. So even in this controlled environment where I was, we were still warned straight from the get-go, do not go in here with this idea that you can just hand out food or you can hand out supplies and suddenly it might not kill someone, because it can. And this girl going into this situation, this person who thought she could go in and create this I don't know, this savior complex of our own, it's costing people's lives. And it is down to this misunderstanding of Africa is a continent where, oh, they don't have much, so I'm going to go in, and even with my high school education, I know more so than a doctor who's trained to try and take care of people. And this is what happens.
Yeah, well, look, there's another uncomfortable fact here. There's wonderful religious folks who've gone to help the poor from all the different religions for centuries now and have done amazing work and what people would say is God's work. But there's also people who take the religions literally and get into this mindset of, I don't need doctors. We don't need no stinking science or doctors, etc. I got this. Either God's gonna save him or God's not gonna save him. So she called it a clinic when it wasn't a clinic. But here in America, the right-wing Christian fundamentalists do that all the time. They'll lure pregnant women into something they call a clinic that isn't a clinic, that doesn't have any doctors, and they'll lie to them. And they'll say, oh, did you know that if you have an abortion, you'll get cancer, etc. And we all take it, well, it's religious, so we can't touch it, so we're not allowed to criticize it, right? And so once you're, and by the way, our right-wing evangelicals also go to Uganda not to do good things, but to try to pass laws against gay people in Uganda, including the most extreme laws that might cost them their lives. So look, I know that there's a lot of great religious folks, including right-wing evangelical Christians in this country that mean to do well. But you've got to have your stuff straight. You can't just go in there, and some, by the way, that don't mean to do well. But even if you mean to do well, you can't just blunder into a situation and be like, nah, it's okay, talk to God. And God says, I don't need doctors, and I got this, and I'm gonna put on the stethoscope and get to work. Look, I don't know, they have no knowledge. Like I saw a documentary, I mean, this is such a simple example, but I saw a documentary where sometimes the Holocaust survivors would die immediately after they were rescued because they were starving, and if you gave them just a little too much food, it could kill them, right? See, a doctor knows that, right? And so they would be prepared for these kind of situations. But if you just say, oh, no, I'm gonna save Uganda and go in there, yeah, of course you're gonna cause a mess. And when we say, hey, don't do that, be really careful when you're dealing with malnourished children who are already on a razor's edge. Then you have idiots who go on Fox News and say, they're reputational terrorists. Is there anything that Fox News won't call a terrorist? I know that that's their guess.
Well, like what,
right?
Guys?
Yeah, well, yes.
Good point.
Yeah,
but I mean, it starts off like when you read through this article, it's not just the idea of trying to take care and by offering food, which she started off doing, which was trying to offer food to try and help in her idea of what she was trying to do. But then a blood transfusion is what is documented here. It is such a complex procedure that she's just offering because she thought that's what needed to be done.
Right, would you ever put a needle into somebody?
No, you guys are 100% right. That's where this conversation should end. Who in their right mind would try to do a blood transfusion when they're not a doctor? That's crazy. If anyone said to me, hey guys, you think we should do a blood transfusion even though we don't have a doctor? I'm like, no, no, we shouldn't.
We're gonna make it worse. As bad as it is, we're gonna make it worse.
Yeah, and it just comes down to this idea that all these children are throwaways anyway. So if you don't try, well, we don't know. You miss all the shots you don't take. Like, this is people's lives. This isn't a game that you're just trying to have trial and error process. This isn't a game of operation where suddenly you're gonna pull the wrong thing and it's all right, I'll try something else. The patient that they mentioned here, somehow by a miracle, you wanna talk about God, say that person is still alive. I don't know how, but that person who got the blood transfusion, that young girl, is actually still alive, but many others aren't. They weren't so lucky.
Yeah, because they had to rush her to a hospital
because the nurse came in and said, this is not okay.
Yes, that's right. That's right, exactly right. Thank God, at least the nurse said, no way. They go, and in Uganda, guess what they have in hospitals? Doctors who save people's lives.
Right.
Well, hey, you made it this far. You must really like the Young Turks. Thank you, we really appreciate you. Now, another easy way to keep supporting us also helps keep your internet activities and data private, all with a push of the NordVPN app. Head to nordvpn.com/TYT right now for 75% off of your next 3 years.